The alarm screamed through my ship at 3:00 in the morning, and I knew before my boots hit the floor that something terrible had happened. I am Commander Elis Vos, captain of the Terran warship Dawnbreaker, and in my 20 years of service I had never heard that particular alarm tone outside of training drills. It meant a human colony was under attack. I ran to the bridge in my sleep clothes. My first officer, Lieutenant Hollis Grant, turned to me with a face pale as frost. On the main screen, a live feed showed our colony. New Meridian burning, great lizard-shaped warships of the Vihari Dominion hung in the sky above the settlement, pouring fire onto homes and farms. I watched a school building collapse in real time. Children had been inside that building an hour ago for an evening program. How long ago did this start? I asked. 40 minutes, Sir. Holly said, his voice cracked. They came in through a blind spot in our sensor net. We only got the signal because a colonist tied a distress beacon to a weather balloon and pushed it above the atmosphere. A weather balloon. Our people had to use a weather balloon to ask for help. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. How many Vihari ships? 9 capital ships and about 30 smaller ones, Holly said. They're not just attacking, Commander. They're landing troops. They're taking people. I felt something cold move through my chest. Slavers, the Vihari, were known for it across the galaxy, but they had never dared touch a human colony before until now. I looked at the faces of my bridge crew, young faces, scared faces, angry faces, good people who had sworn to protect other good people. Send a priority signal to Earth Command and to the coalition of sapient worlds, I said. Tell them what we are seeing. Tell them we need immediate help. We are 3 days away from New Meridian at maximum speed. Set course. Go now. The Dawnbreaker leapt into faster than light travel. For 3 days I barely slept. I watched the recordings from New Meridian over and over. I memorized the faces of the colonists, a man named Peter Hale who ran the general store, woman named Margaret Finch who taught music, a little boy named Toby who had won a science prize last month and whose picture had been broadcast across all human space. These were my people. I was going to find every single one of them. When we finally arrived at New Meridian, the Vihari were gone. They had stripped the colony of 43,000 human beings and left 12,000 more lying in the streets. Gone forever. Our people, farmers and teachers and grandparents and children. I walked through the ruins with a mask over my face and a fire in my heart, and when I got back to my ship, I sent my recordings to every news channel in the galaxy. The response from the coalition of sapient worlds arrived 2 days later. I was ordered to stand down and let the proper channels handle the situation. Our human ambassador, a gentle scholar named Ellen Bright, would present our case before the Grand Chamber. Justice would be done through diplomacy, they said. I obeyed the order, but I did not believe it. I had served in this galaxy long enough to know how the coalition treated humans. They saw us as small. They saw us as new. They saw us as something amusing. I watched the Grand Chamber broadcast. From my bridge, Ambassador Bright stood in the center of that huge circular room, surrounded by 17 other species. Raised platforms, he spoke softly and clearly. He showed the footage of burning homes. He named the 43,000 who had been taken. He asked the coalition to enforce its own laws and help humanity recover our stolen people. The Vihari ambassador stood up next. He was a tall reptile with pale scales and cold yellow eyes, and he smiled with far too many teeth. He said the new Meridian system had once belonged to the Vihari many thousands of years ago, and that humans had settled there without respecting ancient territorial claims. He said what happened was simply the correction of a historical mistake. He said the taken humans would be cared for as workers. I waited for outrage. I waited for the coalition to rise in fury. Instead, the Skarn delegate yawned. The Tailani representative examined her long claws. The Amash ambassador actually checked a device on his wrist as if the meeting was taking too long. I could not believe what I was seeing. Then our Prime Minister Evelyn Shaw appeared on the chamber's main screen. She was a small woman with silver hair and soft eyes, and her voice was the voice of a grandmother. She said, "Return our people or humanity will hunt every Vihari warship to the edge of this galaxy. We will not stop. We will not rest. We will not forget." The chamber erupted in laughter. I will remember that sound for the rest of my life. The scared delegate wiped tears of joy from his compound eyes. The Immer ambassador slapped his knee. The Vihari ambassador grinned at the camera and said loudly for all the galaxy to hear, "Oh, the little mammals are playing at being dangerous. How charming, run along, small ones. Betters are speaking." Ambassador Brighteyes stood alone in the center of all that laughter. He did not argue. He did not cry. He simply nodded once, gathered his papers, and walked out. The laughter followed him all the way to the door. I turned off the broadcast. My bridge was silent. Lieutenant Hollis looked at me with eyes full of a question he did not dare to ask. I stood up from my chair and walked to the main window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 43,000 of my people were being held as property. Somewhere out there, a race of tall reptiles was laughing at us, and somewhere out there, the coalition of sapient worlds had just decided that human lives were worth nothing. My personal communicator chimed a sealed message from Earth. I opened it with my thumbprint. It was from Prime Minister Shaw herself. The message was short. "Commander Voss, the coalition has shown us who they are. Now we show them who we are. Operation Blackthorn is authorized. You are given full discretion. Hunt every Vihari warship. Free every human captive. Leave their slave or empire in ruins. The leash is off." I read the message 3 times. Then I closed my eyes and thought about Toby, the little boy who had won the science prize. I thought about Margaret Finch, the music teacher. I thought about Peter Hale, the storekeeper. I thought about how the coalition had laughed while my people screamed. When I opened my eyes, I was not the same man anymore. I was something older, something my species had been for 200,000 years before we ever reached the stars. I was a hunter. I turned to face my crew. They were watching me. They were waiting for me. Every one of them had seen the footage from New Meridian. Every one of them had heard the laughter in the Grand Chamber. Every one of them had someone they loved on a colony. Somewhere, a colony that could be next. "Listen well," I said. My voice did not shake. "For 12 years we have been the smallest voice at the table. We have been polite. We have been patient. We have been good students of a galaxy that has decided we do not matter. That ends Tonight, from this moment on, every Vihari warship is a target, every slave or ship is a target, every supply depot, every shipyard, every base. We will not stop until the last human captive is home. Are you with me? My crew stood as one. Not a word was spoken. They simply stood and they saluted, and their faces told me everything I needed to know. Set course for Vihari space, I said. Full stealth, full speed. Halls, prepare the rail guns and charge the main cannon. We are going hunting. The Dawnbreaker turned her nose toward the darkness and began to move. Somewhere far ahead of us, a lizard empire was still laughing. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea that mammals can be patient, and mammals can be clever, and mammals have been chasing prey across frozen continents and burning deserts since long before writing was invented. They had no idea that they had just given humanity a reason, and reasons for my species have always been enough. 7 days later, we found our first target. Vihari slaver convoy moved slowly through the Zythe Nebula, 3 warships guarding 6 transport vessels. The transports were heavy with cargo, living cargo. I studied the convoy from a distance of 800,000 km, hidden behind a cloud of ionized gas that scrambled their sensors. Life signs on the transports? I asked. Lieutenant Priameta, my sensors officer, nodded slowly. 2,140. Human biosignatures, Commander. They're alive. They're weak, but they're alive. My jaw locked. 2,000 of my people, right? They're within reach. I closed my eyes and breathed in and out, 3 long breaths. The way my father taught me when I was a boy hunting deer in the forests of Montana. Patience now, fury later. Patience first. Halls, I said, prepare the silent approach. No active sensors, no active communications. We drift in on thruster packets only. Priya, I want a full targeting solution on the 3 warships before we announce ourselves. Weapons Officer Chandra, load the rail guns with tungsten slugs and prepare the electronic pulse warheads. We hit all 3 warships in the same second. Commander, came the answers one after another. We drifted for 6 hours, 6 long patient hours, closing the distance, while the Vihari convoy moved along. Unaware, I used the time to study their ship patterns. The warships rotated their shield frequencies every 11 minutes, a Vihari tradition that they believed was unpredictable. It was not. Humans had cracked that pattern 3 years ago and never told anyone. Our intelligence services had been saving that card for the right moment. This was the right moment, at range of 20,000 km. I gave the order. The Dawnbreaker dropped her cloaking field. Our rail guns fired 3 times in 1 second. Each tungsten slug traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. All 3 Vihari warships lost their shields in the same instant, because we hit them during the shield rotation window. A moment later, our electronic pulse warheads scrambled their communications. They could not call for help. They could not warn anyone. They could not even understand what had just happened. One of the warships tried to fire back. Our second volley of railgun fire disabled its weapons. The other 2 tried to flee. Our main cannon, which we had been charging for the full 6 hours of our silent approach, spoke once. Both ships lost their engines. They drifted blind and helpless while my boarding craft launched toward them. My Marines were led by Major Rosa Callaghan, a tall woman From Ireland with a quiet smile and eyes. Like Winter Stone, she had trained her. Boarding teams for 3 years for exactly this kind of work, zero-gravity combat. Tight corridor movement, rescue of hostages without harming them, her teams. Cut through the Vihari holes with plasma torches and moved through the ships. Faster than the defenders could respond. Within 40 minutes, all 3 warships were secured. Within an hour so were the transport vessels. I came aboard the largest transport myself. I wanted to see, I needed to see. The cargo bay had been turned into a holding pen. 240 humans were packed into a space mint. For 60, they were thin, they were dirty. They had marks on their wrists from restraints. They stared at me as I walked in, and I do not know if they recognized the tan uniform or if they simply saw another armed figure and expected the worst. A little girl stepped forward. She could not have been older than 7. She had dark hair and messy braids and eyes that had seen too much. She looked up at me and she asked, in a small, clear voice, "Are you the monster the lizards warned us about?" I knelt down in my armor so our faces were level. I took off my helmet so she could see me. I smiled at her and I hoped my smile did not look as tired as I felt. "Yes," I said softly, "I am, but I am your monster now, and I am here to take you home." She did not smile, she did not cry, she just nodded once, very serious. And then she put her small hand on my armored shoulder and said, "Okay, thank you." Behind her, 2,000 humans began to move toward us slowly, carefully, not daring to hope. I stood up and opened my arms, and my voice carried through the cargo bay loud and strong. "My name is Commander Ellis Vass of the Terran warship Dawnbreaker. You are free, every single one of you. Walk with me. Medical teams are waiting. Food is waiting. Clean water and soft beds in the voices of people who love you. Walk with me now. We are going home." They walked with me. Some of them cried, some of them held each other up. An older man with a gray beard, who told me his name was Henry Wade, stood very straight and saluted me as he passed. Though he had never been a soldier, a young mother carried twin Bobbies who had been born in captivity and had never seen a human who was not a prisoner. A teenage boy named Danny carried his little sister on his back. Because her legs were too weak, I stood there and watched every single one of them pass. I counted 2,140. Every single one alive, every single one free. Then I turned back to the Vihari captain, who was being held by 2 of my Marines. He was a tall reptile with scars on his snout and a fancy gold collar around his neck, the mark of a senior officer. He glared at me with yellow eyes full of pure hatred. "You have made a terrible mistake, mammal," he hissed. "The Dominion will burn you worlds for this." I looked at him for a long moment, then I walked to the comm station and I opened every coalition broadcast frequency at once. I wanted the whole galaxy to hear what I was about to say. "This is Commander Elias Voss of the Tan Confederation Navy. Today, 7 days after the Vihari Dominion attacked our colony at New Meridian and took 43,000 of our people, I have recovered 2,140 of them from a slaver convoy in the Zealot Nebula. 3 Vihari warships have been neutralized. 6 slaver transports have been taken. We will now continue hunting. We will not stop until every human captive is home to the Vihari Dominion. I say this simply. You laughed at us, now we are coming. You run if you Wish we will enjoy the chase. I closed the channel. I turned back to the Vihari. Captain, you will live, I told him. You will go home in an escape pod. You will tell your people what I told them. And you will spend the rest of your days knowing that I am still out there, hunting your fleet, one ship at a time. I had him loaded into a pod and launched back toward Vihari space. Then I ordered my ship to move. We had 20 more convoys to find. We had 40,000 more humans to bring home, and the galaxy for the first time in its long history was about to learn what a human hunter looked like when she had been given a reason. The broadcast reached the Coalition Grand Chamber 6 hours later. I was told by a source I will not name that no one laughed this time. The Vihari ambassador demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Ambassador Bright, the gentle scholar, stood up from his small seat in the back of the chamber and walked calmly to the center of the floor. He said only one sentence before he walked out. You told us the galaxy had rules. Ambassador Bright said quietly. We are the ones enforcing them now. The chamber was silent as he left. On my bridge I watched the reports come in from Earth. Our shipyards were building new warships at 3 times the normal rate. Volunteers for the Navy had reached numbers not seen in 100 years. Every human world, from the smallest mining colony to the great cities of Earth itself, had turned toward the war with a single united purpose. Somewhere in South Africa, an old song had been rediscovered and was now played on every human radio station, a song about hunters and prey and the long patience of the human heart. Lieutenant Hall came to stand beside me. He was a young man, not yet 30, and his hands were still shaking from the battle, but his eyes were clear. Commander, he said, we have reports of a second Vihari slaver convoy near the Orin cluster. 1,200 human captives, 4 warships. I nodded slowly. My father's voice came back to me from childhood. Patience now. Fury later, patience first. Set the course, I said. Silent approach. We are not done. 3 months passed and the galaxy learned a new word for our species. I first heard the word from a captured Vihari officer during an interrogation on the Dawnbreaker. He was tired and thin, and he had just watched my Marines liberate 900 of my people from his ship. He looked at me across the table and he said, in broken galactic common, you are the ghosts. You are the ones who come from nothing. The whole Dominion speaks of you now, the ghosts of humanity. I did not correct him. Let them call us ghosts. Let them whisper about us in the dark. Let fear of us spread through every Vihari ship and outpost in the galaxy, because fear was a weapon and we were using every weapon we had. By that 3rd month, the Dawnbreaker was no longer hunting alone. 12 more human warships had joined me. We called ourselves the Ghost Fleet, a name that the media back on Earth had picked up and run with. Every one of my captains was a volunteer. Every one of my crews had lost someone at New Meridian or at one of the smaller raids that had followed. Every one of them hunted with the same cold patience I had learned from my father in the forests of Montana. We did not fight the way the Coalition fought. The Coalition had rules of engagement that had been refined over 10,000 years, formal declarations, ritual combat, honor codes between captains, warning shots before main cannon fire. The Vihari knew those rules. The Vihari had built their slaver Raids around those rules, using them to give themselves time to escape after every attack. We threw the rules in the trash. We attacked without warning. We never responded to hails. We never accepted surrender offers during battle. Though we accepted them after, we used stealth in silence and misdirection. We struck at shipyards in the middle of their repair cycles. We hit supply depots when the guards were changing shift. We ambushed patrol routes using the shadows of moons and the gravity wells of dead stars. We were not breaking coalition law because we were not members of the coalition military. We were technically civilians with very large ships and very large guns, but here is what surprised the galaxy most. We did not hurt civilians, not one. We flew past Vihari colony worlds and did nothing. We ignored Vihari merchant vessels that carried no military cargo. We let Vihari hospital ships pass unharmed. We targeted only their warships, their slavers, and their military infrastructure. This discipline, more than anything else, terrified the other species of the coalition because it meant we were not simply angry. It meant we were choosing this. It meant we were in full control. A Telani spy made contact with me on a neutral trading station in the Kappa system. Her name was SLA, and she was small and gray, furred with huge intelligent eyes. She sat across from me in a private booth, and she said, "My people have suffered under the Vihari for 11 generations. We lost 3 worlds to them. We asked the coalition for help twice. The coalition did nothing. I have data shipping lanes, military positions, command structures. I give all of this to you." Why, I asked at her. Sinless smiled a sad small smile. Because you terrify them, Commander, for the first time in my grandmother's grandmother's life. The Vihari are afraid my children may grow up without the fear we all grew up with. This is worth everything to me. I accepted her data. It was genuine. It was complete. It changed our entire campaign overnight. We hit a Vihari shipyard 2 days later and destroyed 11 warships still in dry dock. Other species reached out after that. Cash, a race of thin blue-skinned humanoids, offered us access to their smuggler routes. The Ulani, a silent species of tall beings who communicated through flashes of color, provided us with advanced engine parts. The MMRI, who had never spoken publicly against any other species in their 4,000 history, gave us a list of every Vihari officer involved in slaver operations and their current assignments. The galaxy was quietly taking sides, and more of it was taking ours. The Vihari response was to mass a proper fleet. 40 warships gathered at the Sarin expanse, a wide empty region of space, with nothing but a massive gas giant in its many moons. Their plan was to lure the Ghost Fleet into a trap and destroy us in one decisive engagement. Our intelligence, provided by Senla's network, told us everything about their plan. They did not know we knew. I gathered my captains in a secure room on the Dawnraker. 13 faces, men and women of every color and background, all wearing the same dark gray uniform. My executive officer, Hollis Grant, now promoted to commander of his own ship, the Nightwing. Major Rosa Callaghan, now leading all marine operations across the fleet. Captain Usef Odinga of the Silent Shield, Captain Maro Tanaka of the Longet, Captain Freya Lindfist of the Irongill, Captain Patrick Doyle of the Horn Strike. Every one of them had earned their command through combat. I laid out the plan. We would not meet the Vihari fleet head-on. We would go to the Saran expanse as they expected, but we would arrive early and we would hide our ships in the atmosphere of the gas giant, using its storms to mask our signatures. When the Vihari fleet arrived and deployed for battle, we would emerge from the gas giant storms from directly below them, using the gas giant's gravity well as a slingshot to accelerate our ships to speeds no Vihari weapon could track. It's never been done, said Captain Doyle. It's been done on paper, I said. Our engineering teams on Earth worked it out. 2 years ago, they have been waiting for the right moment. This is the moment. Losses? Asked Captain Tanaka. Unknown, I said. Heavy probably, but if we win, we end this war in a single battle. If we lose, another fleet will take our place. Earth is building 20 new warships every month. Now we are not alone anymore. We are the first wave. We make the most of the moment we have. Every captain nodded. No one spoke. We all knew what was at stake. 5 days later, we were hiding in the storms of the Sarin gas giant. Radiation levels were pushing the limits of our shielding. The turbulence was shaking our ship so hard that 3 of my crew sustained injuries just from being thrown around the bridge, but we held. We held for 11 hours. The Vihari fleet arrived on schedule. 40 warships. Their flagship, the massive Dreadnought Ruler of Ages, was the largest vessel I had ever seen. It was twice the size of any of my ships. Its main cannon could destroy a planet's surface. The Vihari commander, an admiral named Skeshvan, began broadcasting a challenge across all coalition frequencies, demanding that the Ghost Fleet come and face him in honorable combat. We came, but not the way he expected. The Dawnraker punched upward out of the gas giant storms at 3% of the speed of light, and the other 12 ships of the Ghost Fleet rose with her. We came up under the Vihari fleet from a direction they had not been watching at speeds their targeting systems could not track. In time, our rail guns fired first. Our electronic pulse warheads fired second. Our main cannons fired third. All of this happened within the first 4 seconds of the engagement. 18 Vihari warships died in those 4 seconds. The rest tried to turn, tried to fire, tried to flee. We were already past them, already repositioning, already firing again. Major Callaghan's boarding pods launched at the disabled ships, and her Marines took them one by one. Captain Tanaka's long shot, using a new plasma lance weapon developed specifically for this engagement, cut straight through the bow of the Dreadnought Ruler of Ages. The great ship did not die in that first cut, but it bled badly. The battle lasted 97 minutes. When it was over, 31 Vihari warships were destroyed or captured. 9 had surrendered. Admiral Skeshvan himself escaped in a fast courier ship, slipping past our lines. In the final minutes, I let him go. I wanted him to return home and tell his people what had happened. I wanted the fear to spread. We had lost 2 ships. The Horn strike under Captain Doyle had taken a direct hit from the Ruler of Ages before the Dreadnought fell. 412 of our brothers and sisters were gone, including Captain Patrick Doyle himself, who had stayed at his post until the end, firing his rail guns even as his ship broke apart around him. I ordered the Ghost Fleet to pause its operations. Before we continued the hunt, we would hold a funeral. I gathered my remaining captains on the Dawnraker flight deck. and I read every single name of every single one of our fallen 412 names. It took me over an hour. I did not rush. I spoke each name clearly. A young pilot named Aiden Carter, a medical officer named Lorraine Ives, an engineer named Gabriel Ortiz, a cook named Beatrix Sun who had served in the Navy for 41 years and had been 6 months from retirement. I spoke them all. My crew wept openly. Some fell to their knees. A captured Vihari officer standing at the back of the flight deck under guard watched with complete confusion. When the ceremony was over, he asked to speak with me. I agreed. Why do you mourn so much? He asked. They were soldiers. They died in battle. This is the correct end for a warrior. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about how to explain it. Every human life matters to us, I finally said. Every single one. That is why we came for our stolen people. That is why we mourn our fallen with every breath we have. That is why you will lose this war, because you think lives are cheap and we know they are not. He did not answer, but I saw something change in his eyes. Not respect exactly. Snorts more like the first dawn of understanding. Like a man waking up in a strange bed and slowly realizing he is no longer in the world he thought he knew. On the third day after the battle, the Coalition of Sapient Worlds formally called an emergency session. They summoned me, Commander Ellis Vass, personally to appear before the Grand Chamber. I was ordered to stand trial for war crimes. The Ghost Fleet, they said, had destabilized the galaxy. Humanity had gone too far. The laughter of a year ago had turned at last into fear, but fear I knew was not respect. Fear made people do foolish things. I accepted the summons. I would go. I would stand in the same chamber where my ambassador had once been laughed at. I would speak for my species, and then, whatever the coalition decided, I would return to the hunt, because there were still 21,000 of my people unaccounted for, and I had made a promise to a little girl with messy braids that I would take them home, every last one. I walked into the Grand Chamber alone. No guards, no uniform of ceremony, just my standard duty uniform, still bearing a small dark stain on the left sleeve from a wound I had taken during a boarding action 6 days earlier. My face had a fresh scar running from my left eyebrow down to my cheekbone, a gift from a Vihari officer who had tried to take my eye with a combat blade. I had not slept more than 4 hours in any of the last 7 days. I probably looked like a man who had walked out of a nightmare. Good. Let them see what they had created. The chamber was packed. Every one of the 17 member species had sent their highest ranking representative. The galleries above were full of diplomats, military officers, journalists, and observers from every corner of coalition space. Broadcast cameras pointed at me from every angle. This trial would be watched by billions of beings across 1,000 worlds. I walked to the center of the floor, the same place where Ambassador Elan Bright had stood a year ago and been laughed at. I stopped and I turned, slowly looking at every face in the room. The Skarn delegate who had wiped tears of joy from his compound eyes. The Immer ambassador who had slapped his own knee with laughter. The Taylani representative who had examined her claws, and the Vihari ambassador Thathker, who had called us amusing mammals. None of them were laughing now. Thathker would not meet my eyes. The chamber speaker, a tall crystalline being called Alorandi raised his voice. Commander. Elis Vos of the Terran Confederation. You stand accused before this body of unauthorized military action, of destabilizing coalition territory, of operating outside the laws of civilized engagement, and of creating fear among member species. How do you answer these charges? I was supposed to offer a legal defense. I had prepared one, snorts my government's lawyers had worked for 2 weeks to write it. It was a masterpiece of diplomatic argument. It cited 17 different coalition precedents and 4,000 years of intercised law. I set the papers down on the speaker's podium without reading from them. I will not defend myself with your laws, I said. My voice was quiet, but the chamber's sound system carried it to every seat and every camera. Your laws failed my people. Your laws watch while 43,000 humans were taken from their homes. Your laws sat silent while our children were put in cages. Your laws laughed when we asked for help, so I will not hide behind your laws today. I will speak with the only language your chamber has ever truly respected, the truth. The silence was complete. A year ago I sat on my bridge and watched a Vihari warship stand over a burning school on my colony. There were children inside that school. Snorts. I watched my ambassador come here to this very floor and ask you for help. He did not ask for revenge. He did not ask for war. He asked you to enforce your own laws against a raid that even your own treaties called a crime, and you laughed at him. Every one of you. You laughed and you went back to your drinks, and you decided that human lives were not worth the inconvenience of action. I turned slowly, letting my eyes pass across each face. I want you to understand something. We heard that laughter. Every human being on every human world heard it. Children heard it. Grandmothers heard it. Farmers and factory workers and teachers and soldiers and poets, all of us, we heard what you truly thought of us, and we made a decision together as one species. We decided that we would never again be the small ones at the back of the room. We decided that we would never again ask for protection from beings who found our deaths amusing. We decided that we would be our own protection from this day forward and for all days to come. I paused. I looked at Thegor. He still would not meet my eyes. So yes, I have hunted Vihari warships. I have hunted them in their own space. I have destroyed their shipyards and their supply depots and their slaver fleets. I have freed 31,000 of my people, and I will not rest until the last 12,000 are home. I have done all of this, and I would do it a 100 times more. And here is the part that will matter most to this chamber, so listen carefully. I have done all of this without harming a single civilian. Not one, not a Vihari farmer, not a Vihari child, not a Vihari merchant or teacher or elder. You may check the records. I invite you to, because humanity is not the monster you called us in your laughter. Humanity is what you should have been. Humanity is the enforcement of the laws you wrote and then abandoned. A murmur began in the galleries above. I let it grow for a moment before I continued. Now you call me here to stand trial. Fine, I am standing. Look at me. Look at every scar I carry. Look at the dust of 100 battles on my boots. I am here because my government ordered me to come, and I obey my government. But understand this clearly, every one of you. When this trial ends, I am going back. I will continue the hunt. If you imprison me, Another will take my place. If you imprison her, another will take hers. Humanity has no shortage of hunters. We never have. We have been apex predators. On our world for 200,000 years, we have followed prey across frozen continents, across deserts, across mountain ranges. That would break your bones to cross. We have done this not because we are cruel, but because we are patient and we are clever and we do not forget. I took a long breath, so this is my answer to your charges. I'm not here to beg for mercy. I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm here to tell you and through you to tell every species in this galaxy that humanity is no longer small. We are no longer the newest voice you can afford to ignore. From this day forward, we are watching every one of you forever. If any species ever again does to us what the Vihari Dominion did, we will come for them, and we will not stop until justice is done. This is not a threat. This is a fact about the galaxy you now live in. Make your peace with it or do not. Either way, I am going back to work. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Taylani representative stood up. Her name was Senla. I realized with a shock. Not the spy Senla I had met, but her grandmother, the ruling matriarch of the Taylani Confederacy. She walked slowly down from her raised platform and crossed the floor until she stood beside me. She looked tiny next to me, a small gray fur being in formal robes, but when she spoke, her voice was iron. The Taylani Confederacy, she said, withdraws all charges against Commander Vass. We further announce before this body and before all watching worlds that the Taylani Confederacy stands with humanity. Any attack upon human citizens or human territory will be considered an attack upon the Taylani. This is our word. This is our oath. Then the Kresh ambassador stood. The Kresh collective stands with humanity. Then the Alani. The Alani joined with humanity. Then the MMRI, who had not spoken publicly in 4,000 years, their ambassador rose slowly and the whole chamber held its breath. The MMRI stand with humanity, he said. 6 words. 4,000 years of silence broken. 6 words. One by one, the species that the coalition had ignored and mistreated for generations rose and declared themselves. 11 species in total. Every single one of the oppressed and overlooked peoples of this galaxy. They all stood with us. Ambassador Thager of the Vihari Dominion tried to speak. He rose from his seat, his voice trembling with rage, and he began to demand sanctions against these traitor species. The Skarn delegate, who had laughed loudest of all a year ago, stood up and cut him off. Sit down, Thager, the Skarn said. His voice was cold. You brought this on yourselves. You raided a colony that had done you no harm. You took children. You laughed when the humans asked for help. You woke something in this galaxy that none of us understood, and now none of us can put it back to sleep. Face them alone. The Scar Dominion will not support you. Thager sat down. His scales had gone pale gray. I stood there in the center of the floor, and I felt the whole galaxy turn on its axis around me. The coalition of sapient worlds had just changed fundamentally and forever in the space of 10 minutes. And I had said almost nothing to cause it. I had simply told the truth, and the truth, it turned out, had been waiting to be spoken by someone who was not afraid anymore. The Vihari Dominion fell apart within 6 weeks. Without coalition support, their internal factions turned On each other, the slaver caste which had grown fat on the raiding of weaker worlds was overthrown by younger officers who understood that the old ways had led their people to ruin. 3. Core Vihari worlds declared independence and sued for peace with humanity. They offered full cooperation in recovering the remaining 12,000 human captives. They offered reparations. They offered war criminals for trial. We accepted all of it, but one man refused to surrender. Admiral Skeshven, the architect of the original New Meridian raid, fled with the last loyal elements of the Vihari fleet toward the galactic rim. He took with him the remaining human captives, 8,147 of my people. He used them as shields. He broadcast demands from the deepest, uncharted regions of space, places where even the coalition's maps showed only blank areas. He said he would keep the humans alive only if we granted him full amnesty, sovereign territory, and reparations from the human government. I read his message twice, then I turned to Hollis, who is now my full fleet commander. He does not understand us. I said quietly, he still thinks we are the same species his grandfather raided for sport. Snorts, he still thinks hostages will save him. He has learned nothing. What are your orders, Commander? Hollis asked. I looked at the star map. The Ghost Wastes, a wide empty region of collapsed stars and radiation storms. Nobody went there. Nobody lived there. It was the perfect place to hide. It was also therefore the perfect place to corner an enemy who had nowhere left to run. Prepare the fleet, I said. We are going to the edge of the galaxy. We are bringing our last people home. The Ghost Wastes were as terrible as their name. We had to travel for 6 weeks to reach them, and the last 2 weeks were through regions of space where our star charts simply ended. The radiation was so heavy that our shields dropped by 3% every day, requiring constant maintenance. Dead stars twisted space around us in ways that made our navigation computers scream warnings. Every few minutes, 3 times we nearly flew into unmapped gravity wells that would have torn our ships apart, but we made it, and we were not alone. The Taylani had sent 4 cruisers under Matriarch Senla herself, who had chosen to come in person, leaving her diplomatic post for the first time in decades. The crash had sent 6 gunships, fast and deadly vessels crewed by blue-kinned warriors who had trained for this moment for years. The Ulani had sent a massive carrier, a ship so large it could deploy 300 fighters in a single wave. The MMR Tai, breaking another of their ancient traditions, had sent a single vessel, but it was a warship the likes of which none of us had ever seen. A pitch-black sphere that seemed to absorb light itself. Their ambassador, speaking for the first time in public in 2 years, said only that the ship was called Last Word and that it would be enough. We believed him. Together with my 17 human warships, we were a coalition fleet of 29 vessels crewed by 5 different species, all hunting one man. Admiral Skeshven had taken his forces to a triple star system called Ozen's Grave. 2 of the 3 stars were long dead, collapsed into black dwarfs that still held the planetary debris in twisted orbits. The 3rd star was a red giant in its final stages, slowly devouring what remained of its inner planets. Skeshven had hidden fleet behind the red giant, using its immense mass and its constant flares to mask his ships from sensors. He had 22 warships remaining, including his own Flagship, the battered dreadnought ruler of ages, which had limped away from Sarin Expanse half-it and had been repaired in secret. He thought we could not find him. He was wrong. The MMRI had sensors we did not fully understand. Their ambassador simply gave us the coordinates. I called a council of captains aboard the Dawnraker, 29 commanders from 5 species gathered in a single room, listening through translation devices too. My voice, I laid out the plan. SKH Van will execute the hostages the moment he believes he has lost. That is his nature. That is what he has promised. So our standard tactics do not apply. We cannot simply engage his fleet and destroy it. We must do two things at the same time. We must engage his fleet so completely that he cannot give the order to his hostage guards, and we must board his flagship directly in the same moment and take the hostages before any order can reach them. Impossible, said one of the Crush captains, a scarred warrior named VTH. Extremely difficult, I agreed. Not impossible. Major Rosa Callaghan of my Marines has spent 10 weeks planning for this. Major Callaghan, please explain. Rosa stood. She was tall and thin, with her red hair cut short and her eyes sharp as blades. She laid out the plan with the calm of a woman describing a walk in a garden. We will deploy 70 stealth boarding pods 72 hours before the main fleet engagement. She said the pods will travel cold with no active systems, using only pre-calculated drift trajectories. They will arrive at the flagship's hull from the direction of the Red Giant, using the star's radiation to mask their approach. Each pod contains 8 Marines. Total boarding force of 560 elite operators, all volunteers, all trained specifically for this mission. Every one of them speaks enough Vihari to read signs and intercept communications. 560. Against how many Vihari soldiers? Asked Matriarch Senla. Approximately 3,000 aboard the flagship. Rosa said calmly, we are not there to fight them all. We are there to secure the hostage areas and hold them. While we do that, the fleet outside will engage SKH Van's warships. If the fleet wins, we evacuate the hostages. If the fleet loses, we hold the hostage areas until the fleet wins, however long that takes. And if the fleet does not win? Asked VTH. Rosa smiled. It was not a comforting smile. Then we hold until we cannot hold anymore, and we take as many Vihari with us as the galaxy can afford to lose. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Matriarch Senla stood. I will lead the Tailani cruisers personally, she said. I have been a diplomat for 60 years. Today I remember that my grandmother was a warrior. This is a fitting way to complete a long life. One by one, the other commanders committed. The plan was accepted. Rosa's boarding pods launched 72 hours before the engagement began. I could not speak to them during those 3 days. They had to remain completely silent. They drifted through the radiation of the Red Giant, 560 people holding their breath in tiny coffins of metal and hope, moving at speeds so slow that they barely registered as motion at all. The boarding pods were the most vulnerable element of the operation. If Skeshv detected them, they would die in an instant, and the hostages would die shortly after. For 3 days I did not sleep. I sat on my bridge and I waited, and I counted the minutes. At hour 71 and 47 minutes, Rosa sent a single coded Signal, a quick burst of static on a frequency nobody was watching. It meant one thing: they were attached to the flagship's hull. They were ready to cut their way in. I gave the order. The coalition fleet emerged from behind the nearest black dwarf at full combat speed. We opened fire before Skeshven sensors could even finish identifying us. The first Vihari warship died in 7 seconds, the second in 12. By the end of the first minute, 4 Vihari ships were destroyed and the rest were scrambling to form battle lines. Skeshven himself came on all frequencies screaming. He threatened to execute the hostages. He demanded we stand down or he would give the order. I did not respond. I knew Rosa had already reached the hostage areas. I knew her Marines were already in position. Every second Skeshven spent screaming at me was a second he was not actually giving the order. My silence was a weapon. The battle outside raged for 40 minutes. It was the largest fleet engagement of the entire war. The Vihari fought harder than they had ever fought before because this time they were truly cornered. They had nowhere to run. They destroyed 3 of our ships. One of them was the Silent Shield, Captain Yusuf Odinga's ship. Another was the Longet, Captain Marrow Tanaka's ship. The third was a crash gunship whose name I did not know at the time, but I learned later. 47 people aboard, all of them hunters like us, but we destroyed 19 Vihari ships in that same time. Admiral Skeshven's fleet was broken. His flagship, the Ruler of Ages, was the last vessel still fighting, and inside that flagship, Rosa Callaghan and her Marines were closing on him. I watched the internal battle through helmet cameras patched into our secure feed. Rosa's teams had secured all 12 hostage areas within the first 20 minutes of the engagement. She had lost 19 Marines. Every single hostage was alive. 7,994 of my people crammed into cargo bays and prisoner cell, suddenly protected by the most elite soldiers humanity had ever trained. But 153 humans had already died. The Vihari guards had started executions the moment the main battle began, before Rosa's teams could reach all the holding areas. 153 of my people. I logged every name. Later, I read every name during the memorial. I remember every name still. Rosa then moved her teams toward the bridge. Skeshven had surrounded himself with his elite guard, 200 of the best Vihari soldiers, armed with the finest weapons the Dominion had ever produced. Rosa had 140 Marines left who were not protecting hostages. She took the bridge in 37 minutes. When it was over, Skeshven himself was dragged to the bridge floor. He was still alive. He was unharmed physically. He had been disarmed. Rosa put him on his knees and put a restraint on his throat. Then she called me. I came aboard the Ruler of Ages. I walked through corridors still smoking from plasma fire. I walked past my Marines, bloodied but alive, standing guard over their prisoners. I walked past my people, the rescued captives, being led gently toward the evacuation shuttles by medical teams who had flown in after the battle ended. I walked onto the bridge and I stood in front of Admiral Skeshven. He looked up at me. He was older than I had realized. His scales had begun to gray at the edges. His eyes, however, still burned with hatred. You think you have won, he hissed in broken galactic common. You think this is the end? Others will come for your species. Your victory is temporary, your kind will be hunted across the stars for generations. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about a little girl with messy braids who had asked me if I was the monster the lizards warned her about. I thought about Peter Hale, the storekeeper. I thought about Margaret Finch, the music teacher. I thought about Toby, the little boy who had won the science prize, whose body we had finally identified 2 weeks ago in a mass holding pen on a forgotten moon. I thought about my people, all of them, the living and the lost. You took our people, I said quietly. You laughed when we asked for them back. You thought distance and power would protect you. But you never understood us, SKH Van. Humans have been apex predators on our world for 200,000 years. We followed great beasts across frozen continents. We hunted across oceans that no other species on our planet could cross. We chased our food to the ends of our world. Before we even had writing, did you really think the stars would stop us? Did you really think empty space would stop us when ice and fire and mountain ranges never did? Skeshen did not answer. His yellow eyes had grown tired. Something in them had finally broken. I did not hurt him. I did not raise a weapon. I turned to Matriarch Senla, who had come aboard with me, and I gestured at the old Vihari admiral. He is yours, I said. Your grandmother's grandmother suffered under his ancestors. The Telani built the intelligence network that found him. His judgment belongs to your people, not mine. My war with him is over. Senla bowed her small gray head to me. She spoke quietly in Telani to her guards. They lifted Skeshven gently but firmly. He would stand trial before a Telani tribunal. He would face the justice of the people he had hunted for generations. My marine stepped back. It was no longer our matter. I walked off the bridge. I walked through the corridors one more time. I found the holding area where the last of my people were being evacuated, and I stood at the edge of the great cargo bay, and I watched them come home. 8,047 living humans saved, 153 lost forever. A young woman walked up to me. She was perhaps 17 or 18 years old. Her hair was still dirty, still tangled, but her eyes were clear. She stopped in front of me and she looked up. And I realized with a start that I knew her. It's you, I said softly, the little girl from the first ship from Zelith. Nebula, my name is Ava, she said. Her voice was calm and steady. I was 7 years old when you came for me. I am 17 now. I kept count of every day you were hunting. Every day. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She was simply looking up at me with those old eyes, and she said, I joined the Terran Navy 2 weeks after I was rescued. I just finished my training. I am an officer. Now I'm going to hunt, Commander. I am going to hunt like you hunted. For the rest of my life, I am going to make sure nobody ever laughs at us again. I knelt down the way I had knelt down 10 years ago on a slaver ship in the Zealot. Nebula, I took off my hat and I looked her in the eye. Then you are my daughter, Ava, I said, and you are my sister, and you are the best of what we are. She saluted me. I saluted her back. She walked onto the evacuation shuttle with her head held high, and I watched her go, and I understood then that my war was truly over. Because I had not saved her alone, I had been saved by her. Just as much by her courage, by her promise, by her willingness to carry forward what my generation had started. We returned home through stars that know Longer seemed cold, we passed through. Systems where Telani children waved at. Our ships as we flew by, where Crush. Warriors saluted us from their stations. Where Ani flashed colors of welcome in. MMR TIE ships dipped their light. Greeting, the galaxy had changed. The coalition had reformed itself. New laws had been written in the months while we had been hunting. No species would ever again be preyed upon without consequence. No raid would go unanswered. Every member world of the new coalition was bound by blood and by oath to the defense of every other. Humanity had been offered a seat on the new ruling council, and we had accepted it. My government had chosen Ambassador Elen Bright, the gentle scholar who had stood alone in a laughing chamber 1,000 years ago to represent us. I was told he sat now at the central table, and that no one ever interrupted him when he spoke. I myself retired from active service. I did not want a council seat. I did not want a medal. I wanted to go home. I bought a small farm in Montana in the same forest where my father had taught me to hunt. I raised goats. I grew apples. I fished in a cold, clear river. I lived quietly the way my grandfather had lived, the way all human hunters had lived between hunts for 100,000 generations. I read books. I walked in the woods. I watched the stars at night, and I thought about the friends I had left out there. Among them, 10 years after the war ended, I was invited to speak at the Grand Chamber one more time. A memorial was being held for the fallen of the war on all sides. I accepted the invitation. I put on my old uniform, which no longer fit me well. I flew to Kelter Prime. I walked into the Grand Chamber for the last time. Captain Ava Mercer walked beside me. She was a grown woman now, a ship commander in her own right, captain of the newest human warship, the Dawnbreaker. She had served in the Navy for more than a decade. She had hunted slavers across 3 star systems. She had freed thousands. Her crew worshipped her. She was in every way my daughter in spirit, if not in blood. She looked at the assembled delegates as we walked down the central aisle. Every species that had once laughed at us was there. Their old representatives had all retired or moved on. The new faces looked at me with something that was not fear exactly, and not exactly admiration either. Something older. Commander Ava asked quietly as we walked, "Do you think they fear us?" I thought about it as we reached the center of the floor. I looked up at the high seats, at the cameras, at the billions of beings watching across 1,000 worlds. I smiled. "No," I said softly, "they do not fear us. Fear fades. Ava, fear is a small emotion. What they feel now is something far older, something that lives in the bones of every prey species that ever watched a predator step out of the dark." I looked at her, at this young woman who had been a starving child in a cargo bay, at this daughter of humanity who would carry us forward. "They respect us," I said, "and they always will, because they remember what happened the last time." They laughed. She nodded slowly. She understood. She would teach others to understand. We stood together, the old hunter and the new, in the center of the galaxy that had once called us small, and somewhere far away the stars kept turning the way they always had, and the way they always would, for as long as there were humans to watch them. And